Hello, everybody. I am Charles Bass, and thanks for joining us for this Alumni Spotlight, one of the USD Alumni Association's many virtual engagement opportunities. While most USD staff continue to work remotely, we are striving to meet the Alumni Association's mission of engaging and enriching the Torero community for life. I do want to take a moment to extend our wishes and prayers for all those watching. There is a lot going on in the world and in our state, and we wish health, happiness, and serenity to you and your loved ones. With that, I'm happy to welcome today's guest, Adama from the class of 2005. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We encourage you to toggle to gallery view and use the Q&A feature to ask questions along the way. First, though, a quick bio. Adama serves as Vice President for State and Community Relations for Visa, where she is responsible for advancing technology and business issues at the state level. These issues include a wide variety of technical topics such as cybersecurity, data security, virtual currencies, data breach, and privacy, as well as engaging on traditional business issues such as labor and taxation. Prior to joining Visa, Adama was the head of California Government Affairs for Farmers Insurance. She also has an extensive background in financial services and healthcare policy and began her career as an executive fellow in the Schwarzenegger administration. In October of 2017, the Los Angeles Times published an open letter led by Adama and signed by over 140 women on the pervasive culture of sexual harassment, discrimination, and assault in politics. That letter struck a chord with women in politics and other industries who reached out to share their stories and to call for solutions. This resulted in the creation of the We Said Enough Foundation, whose mission is to eliminate bullying, harassment, and assault in the workplace. Adama now serves as president of the board. In December of 2017, Time magazine recognized Adama as a silence breaker and featured her on the cover of their People of the Year edition. Adama has a BA in political science from USD and just moved from San Francisco back to America's finest city. Adama, I invite you to turn on your camera now, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right, great to have you and great to be with you. We'll just jump right in. And we'll have time, a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. And I just thought we'd start by talking a little bit about your role as Visa's Vice President for State and Community Relations. What does a typical day look like for you, if there is such a thing?
Yeah, well, right now a typical day looks a lot like this. But what I really do is I work kind of external affairs type position. So I'm kind of our company's liaison between local elected officials, state elected officials, as well as kind of governors, attorney generals, things like that. I work on all of the issues that you mentioned, but I also work on kind of random things like transit projects and social impact. I work really closely with our foundation. That's kind of the community relations piece of my job. So looking around at ways that Visa can kind of continue to be good corporate citizens and really be part of the communities that we already serve. That's something that's really important to us. We're a California-based company. We've been headquartered in San Francisco for over 60 years. So being part of the community and really playing a part in it is very important to us.
Well, it sounds like variety is the key to your days every day. How do you think your liberal arts education might have helped prepare you for this career?
Yeah, you know, I really think a liberal arts education is so critical. I mean, God bless you if you can do the hard sciences. I'm not one of those people. But I mean,
comm studies major myself. So.
Yeah, I mean, but a liberal arts education, you know, I did a minor in English, and I feel like you see a different view of the world. And you really see the fact that the world has so many shades. There's not one right answer. Like in math or, you know, a lot of the hard sciences, there's a right answer. And you're trying to get to that right answer. And you're showing the steps along the way. And, you know, working in politics and working with elected officials and working with communities, it's really important to realize that there's no one size fits all. There's no one right answer. And something that might be the right answer for one constituency isn't necessarily the right answer for another one. And having that liberal arts education, it really gives you the ability, I mean, I feel like in college you hear this all the time, oh, it's a college degree means you can think critically. But it really does mean that you can think critically. You can look at a problem and you don't immediately think there is a right answer, let's get to it. You realize there might be a right answer, but there might be 10 right answers, and you can't kind of let that perfect be the enemy of the good.
That's really perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. That's a good thing to keep in mind. What about at USD, favorite professors, political science or otherwise, that you can think of?
How could I choose? Oh my God. So there's like amazing professors at USD, and it's so cool because so many of them are still there. I really loved Professor Dixon's class, and I mean the con law class, and like that class actually told me I do not want to be an attorney because I don't necessarily want people asking me for answers that, even if I kind of know them, like now I have to like sit and walk through my thinking like immediately, even though that is actually pretty much what I do for work. But also I think that class was at like 7 something in the morning. And I remember that being really difficult for all of us.
Yeah. I've met so many alumni, and I always ask them who their favorite professor was, and oftentimes Professor Dixon's name comes up. He also comes up as their hardest, most difficult professor.
Easily. I was doing some work at my mom's house, and I actually came across my con law textbook, and I was looking through it, and I was like, wow, I took a lot of notes, and I apparently used that textbook from like cover to cover, highlighted all the way through it, notes all the way through it. I mean, and some of those things there, it's not like I remember the cases because I did not go to law school, but I definitely remember the thinking process that he put us through that really necessitated you being very thorough. And now working in public policy, that's something that's super important. I am one of those people, like, I will read a bill from cover to cover. I will read a 300-page bill. I will read every single bit of it. I will highlight it. I will go through it. I will pull out the parts of it that are relevant. I will pull out parts of it that I think don't make sense in statute, because I read things from cover to cover because of that class.
That's an important task. I wish a lot of our I don't want to get into politics necessarily, but I wish everybody would do that.
I know where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Well, I wish that too, let me tell you.
Well, since we're walking up into that, into politics and the issues that kind of brought you a little bit more into the spotlight, can you talk about the letter that you spearheaded, and really the courage it took to put yourself out there that ultimately led to you being recognized as a silence breaker and landed you on the cover of Time Magazine's People of the Year edition?
Yeah, having worked in politics my whole career, I remember the kind of chain of events that led up to it, and we're actually coming up on the I think like 3-year anniversary of it now. I had just heard the tape, the Weinstein tape of him talking to this woman in her hotel room, and it was so repugnant. It was so gross. But I also thought, like, oh, I've heard all of this stuff before. I've heard, you don't want to make me an enemy. You want to keep me as your friend. Don't embarrass me. All of those things, and when you ask someone, like, why do you do that? And they just say, like, well, that's what I do. Like, get on the train or stay off, and it was such a familiar refrain to me. And I was talking later that night at an event, and I was talking to several lobbyists, male lobbyists who work for other companies, and they were saying, but we're allies. How come, are we doing the right things? And me and another friend who's also a lobbyist were just kind of saying, like, but like, our arms work. We don't need help with doors. Like, I'm safe I can walk on a sidewalk. And they were kind of like, well, what do you need? And we said, we need real allies. We need you if you know that someone else just took our idea in a meeting. We need you to speak up. We need you to, if you know that I'm not getting paid the same way that you do, I need you to say that. And we're having that conversation. And another lobbyist from yet another company, this is a meeting with a bunch of lobbyists, we all hang out together. He came up and he was really drunk, and he was trying to hug me and he was trying to kiss me, and it was just super awkward. And it wasn't even like the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It wasn't the first time, whatever. And I was trying to push him away. And I remember the guys were just kind of standing there, and my friend who was there looked at them and said, is this like an SNL skit? We just talked about this. How did you miss this opportunity? And they were kind of like, and I just remember leaving that event, and I had to drive back to San Francisco, and I was like stewing. And I guess I was kind of already on just like a slow burn after hearing the Weinstein tape. And I started calling friends, and I was like, we need to do something. This is ridiculous. Like, and that's kind of how the letter was born. And it happened started like a Friday afternoon, and by Monday we had over 140 women, and we still had people calling, and we realized that the word was getting out, because I think over 1,000 women saw it, 147 signed, but for years I have still had women say to me, like, I wish I had signed your letter. I really wish I had, because I saw it, but I didn't know. And by Monday morning, we knew we had to get it out, because legislators were saying that they were calling the LA Times and telling them not to publish it. And let me be clear, when we started the letter, we were going to put it on this like Girls on the Grid, which was like a Sacramento political blog. But as soon as I started getting like real pushback from men in the political community, I was like, okay, so maybe I am taking this to the LA Times. And I called my boss, and I kind of told him what I was thinking, and he was like, go for it. So once I had his blessing, we called the LA Times. They said that the editorial section said they didn't want it, but we've been working with another reporter, because she'd called me like Saturday morning, because there's no secrets in politics. It's the other problem. And she said, I heard you're working on something. And I was like, how did you hear that?
Wow.
Like, I just heard that I was working on something. And she said, I want to write the story. And she said, I need women to go on the record. We had like so many women who were willing to go on the record and tell their stories in politics that she said, stop sending me people, because I got to file this story. And it came out the next morning in the LA Times, and it set off a real firestorm. Like people are like, try to like go viral. Like, I would not try to go viral ever again, because like I still have like hundreds of voicemails, hundreds of text messages. Like, my whole life was like a complete storm that I really, even 3 years, still haven't really recovered from. And then Time called and was like, we're working on a story as well. And at that point I was talking to a lot of reporters, so it didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. And then they called me back and were like, we'd done a couple interviews over the phone, and then they said, hey, we want to do a photo shoot, come to LA. And I thought, oh, it's going to be one of those things where like it folds out, and there's going to be a bunch of people. And then they said, actually, it's just going to be you and Taylor Swift and Ashley Judd and Susan Fowler, the woman from Uber, and a couple others. And I was like, what? And they were like, you can't tell anybody. And I was like, who would believe it? Like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. So we did the photo shoot in San Francisco in a warehouse. And all of us were there. And it was all of us were there except Taylor Swift. Let me just throw that out of the way so nobody has to ask if I met Taylor Swift. I did not. But the rest of us were there and had a really amazing conversation about our respective worlds and what that looked like in acting. There was a woman who was a farm worker, and she was telling about sexual violence among farm workers and how prevalent that is. And I think we've started to learn more about that over the last few years. And then they were like, don't tell anybody, don't say anything. And we were all just kind of like, okay. And then a few weeks later, I saw a report that said basically who should be the Time Person of the Year? And it was like, is it President Trump? Is it Me Too? Is it, I think like some doctors who worked on Ebola? Is it, all this stuff? And that's when I realized like, oh my God, that's what that was. And then the president made this I think he probably tweeted. And he was like, I was asked to be the Time Person of the Year, but they said I'd have to do a photo shoot. So I said no. And I was like, oh my God, the president, first of all, he's lying. Because we already did that photo shoot. It was like a very surreal moment to realize that's actually what that was. And sure enough, it came out like a week later. And once again, it was like a very viral thing where it seemed like everybody in the world had my phone number and was calling me and emailing me and hitting me up on social media. And I remember at one point I told my friends, because USD had posted something, and they were like, oh, Adama, 2005. And I said, oh, my university posted something. And my friend looked at me like I was insane. And she said, Adama, everyone who's ever remotely met you is posting something. Right. You just haven't been on social media today. Because I'd been doing interviews, and I'd been I was also at work. I was also interviewing. I was trying to hire someone. I had like 6 interviews set up that day with
Oh,
people.
wow.
So they were coming in and being like, are you on the cover of Time magazine today? It was all surreal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing moment for you for sure.
Yeah.
But then, how you've already said 3 years of text messages and all that. And I know your Phi Alpha Delta friends would love a shout out. So, but how has your life changed in that 3 years? I know,
Yeah, more than anything, I think what the Time cover did is it really legitimized the Me Too movement. And we had been, we'd started already to get so much pushback, like this is an anti-men thing. And people were really trying to erase Tarana Burke from the work that she'd actually been doing for decades. And other women who'd really been in this space, it legitimized that. And it said that this is real. This is something that is incredibly impactful. This is like a real moment. I mean, it's another Anita Hill type moment. It's another opportunity for us to revisit this, not let it kind of move off the front pages and to really move forward. And, one of the things that I'm so lucky about is that I do have friends, and I'm still friends with so many of the people that I was in Pi Alpha Delta with. I mean, those like the first people that I call, like when something like big happens in my life, like we still have a text chain of, all of us from PAD that we all still talk to each other. And, they were all like, oh my God, are you on the cover of Time magazine? Like, of course you're on the cover of Time magazine.
yeah. And from this cover and just the work you've been doing came We Said Enough. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about We Said Enough.
So we realized very quickly that this issue was bigger than just kind of California state politics, which really means Sacramento capital politics. We had women reach out to us from academia, from farm workers, from science, from national security. I mean, just about any industry, and say, how do we, do this? And so I'm not saying we tell them how to do it, but very quickly we realized we needed an attorney, because we had, even though we were not naming names, we weren't doing anything like that, we had men who were like, this is defamation. And I was like, just because you recognize yourself in some of these stories, name, even without a name, first of all, it's not about you. It's just about a dude who does the same stuff that you do, which is also problematic. But we realized we needed a real focused way to really triage these issues, to help women figure out what they need to do. And I'll just stop and just say, if something has happened to you and you want to go public and tell your story, I tell people the same thing every time. Get trauma counseling first and talk to an attorney, because slander, libel, defamation, those laws are really real. And we've seen a lot of women who, they feel like, I want that cathartic moment. I want to be able to unload this so I can finally move on with my life. And it's not that simple. And, a lot of times, our legal system isn't fair. We don't have processes and procedures that are set up for survivors, for victims to come forward and actually get justice. And a lot of times, statute of limitations passed, or it's very unclear like what exactly the situation was, because memory, hindsight's 2020, but memory is like 100, 175. Like, it's not good,
Right.
So I give that same advice, and I want to always make sure that I do that. But we also continue to work on legislation, policy changes, work with elected officials who do want to make policy changes, who want to look at that. We're still doing that. It's funny, we thought this would be something we do for like a year or two, and it continues to move on. We get outreach. I'm now working with a number of other organizations that kind of do the same things. I do a lot of public speaking. The work continues.
Sure. I wish you would run out of work, because the problem would be solved. I just read about the Hollywood Commission and their report on the a survey that almost 10,000 women and men took, and unfortunately one of the drawouts from that survey was that there's little faith in full accountability, even though you have some high profile cases. You mentioned Harvey Weinstein, and Anita Hill led that commission, but there is certainly some good that came out of that. And one of the things that they talked about was the reporting of, whether it's anonymous or otherwise, creating some reporting mechanisms. And I know that We Said Enough is working on that very thing, correct?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the first things that we started working on, especially for California. The state of California instituted what they call a workplace conduct unit. It's based kind of loosely on something that the city of LA already had, and that they were really beefing up. But it was a way to actually have impartial professionals kind of from the HR and jurisprudence space look at cases, kind of investigate them, because the investigation piece of it's also really important, and then give a real nonpartisan kind of answer. And I wish I could tell you that, what we have set up in California works seamlessly. There's still a lot of kinks, let me tell you. Like, the work on that continues to go on. But, I work with some other women in academia looking at how do we actually get to some of the drivers of bias. How do we actually drill down and figure out how we can get real numbers? I mean, around diversity, because a lot of this is also a diversity issue, right? When you don't have many women in a space, or when you don't have many people of color, when you don't have many LGBTQ in a space, when that diversity is lacking, it becomes very easy for the minority, in whatever minority they are, to kind of become the other, and to be very easily objectified and treated poorly. And, those are some of the root causes of discrimination, and be it, sexual harassment or pay discrimination or anything like that. So we've really started, I think 3 years now down the road, started to talk about, like, how do we actually get to the root problems? So it's what I'm realizing is this is a journey with no end.
Yeah. That's, I watched the commencement address you gave. Let me just pause and say, if you have any questions for Adama, now's a good time. This time is flying by. We could probably talk for 5 hours, but if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A. But I watched the commencement address you gave at USD, and I loved how you simply but directly challenged everyone in the audience. If you see something, say something. I mean, that's kind of a trite statement. You didn't say that. It's a trite statement you see at the airport, but you said that if you see somebody acting out with bad behavior, call them out, and have your colleagues have their backs, and your colleagues and your friends. I mean, can you elaborate really on the importance of speaking up when something is not right?
Yeah, these things really breed through complacency. And one of the things that we found very quickly is that a lot of it is peer pressure, right? We've heard a lot of, in the last few years about, it's just locker room talk. But, it's so important. What you do in the dark is basically what you're going to do in the light. And if you have been allowed, if nobody has ever actually put their foot down and said, hey, that's really inappropriate. We don't talk about our friend like that. We don't talk about our colleague like that when he or she is not in the room. It's so important to let your circle of friends know what your boundaries are, what you do or do not think is appropriate. Because when you don't set those boundaries for what is appropriate conversation, what is appropriate for how we talk about Black people, what is appropriate for how we talk about homeless people, what is appropriate for how we talk about immigrants, minorities, women, people will assume you're fine with whatever they're saying. And it's a lot harder when someone has, said these things for 6 months for you to, when you finally snap and say, like, hey, stop saying that. It's a lot harder to unwind that, to unring that bell, because they're just looking at you like, I thought you were fine with this. I've been saying this for months, So when you hear something the first time, or when you see it the first time, you don't have to embarrass that person, but you can pull them aside and say, hey, I saw this. This is how I heard it. I can't imagine that's what you mean. Or sometimes you do have to be just very brave and very vulnerable and say, we do not talk about women like that. Adama is our friend. When she's not in the room, that's not how we talk about her. And we have to have those conversations. And it's even more important for men, for white people, for people in positions of power. I mean, even myself at this point, it is so important for me to stand up for young women, young people of color, and make sure that they are given opportunities that I didn't have, and to make sure that they don't have, I don't want young women in politics to have to like come up in politics the way I did. I don't want them to have to go through any of those things. And that is one of the really like driving things that really fed the letter for me and all of the women that signed it. We were like, all of this really gross stuff happened to us. Like, we don't want that to continue to be how it is. And I mean, it's a big rock to chip away at, but it's worth it.
It's amazing the courage you took to do that, and the many thousands of women, young women, people of color, white men who are going to benefit from your work. So that's a remarkable thing, and I salute that. We're just about out of time. I have a few more quick questions just to help get to know you a little better. And these are sort of these are lighter questions. You were in the Bay Area, which has some fine restaurants, but now you're back in San Diego.
Yes.
And what's your go-to meal?
Oh, so I live in South Park, and there's this place, Buona Forchetta.
Oh,
Oh my God. And it's like around the corner from me.
I think they're open, so we'll see you there in about 30 minutes.
Yeah, that is amazing. That's like the best calamari I've ever had, like anywhere, including in Spain. Like, it is really incredible. And their pizza, and like the sad part is, like, at this point, like my credit card statement is like Buona Forchetta every other day.
So this alumni spotlight thing is an offshoot of USD Chats with Charles, which you can find those online. This is the second mention of Buona Forchetta. I think I should be getting some sort of sponsorship out of them. So, all right, next up, this is a little more serious. Can you think of a book or movie that inspired you, and why?
Oh my gosh. So many. So this is like, it's not like a fun movie, but one of my like movies that left like such a lasting impression on me, Cry Freedom. It's about Steve Biko, who is a civil anti-apartheid crusader from South Africa. It's really incredible. And the thing that has always stuck with me, at the end, they give this really long list of ways that people in prison died. And it's like fell off a chair and hanged, like just really insane stuff. And that, like, I've always kind of been like a crusader kind of person, but that is something that really informed me. Like, deep injustice really just irks me. And I guess I'm a Black female, so I can't really look away from it, but deep injustice really, 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 really bothers me.
A question from the audience real quick, it's going to be hard to be real quick, but what advice would you give someone who wants to make a career switch into social impact or corporate citizenship? The best way to do that, and besides Visa, which obviously does it great, what other companies do you admire in that space?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies now who are doing really incredible things in the philanthropy and social impact space. Pepsi is doing really big things there. There's like so many. Salesforce, it's really part of their ethos. Mark Benioff actually just wrote a book called Trailblazer, and social impact is really like his passion. And the amount of money that he's given away in the Bay Area is absolutely insane. I mean, I don't know if I could tell you like how you get into kind of philanthropy or social impact, because I'm not really in it. It's just kind of a tangential piece of my job because I work closely with elected officials, policymakers in various areas. It's important for me to be aware of what the company is doing to improve those areas. So I don't know that I can really give great advice, but I mean, if you see entry-level jobs in social impact, in diversity and inclusion, in community relations, you should definitely think about it. I also get hit up all the time on LinkedIn by people who are like, hey, can I just talk? And like, I can't talk to everybody, I'm not gonna lie, but if you ask me a compelling question, I'll probably answer it, and I don't mind doing that. And so if you see somebody in that space that you do respect and you really like them, let them know that and see if they're just willing to, talk. And, one of the things that I'll say, if you do outreach to people who are busy, offer something in return. And I don't really know, it just kind of depends on what that is. If you have expertise in something, or if you know somebody in the field, give them a hook so there's a reason. Because a lot of times I get people who are like, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn and, I saw your bio and it's really amazing. Can we have coffee? And it's like,
right.
That's hard when you actually get like hundreds of those. So tell me something compelling about yourself, about what it is, what your passion it is, where you're from, make it compelling to me as well. So
that's awesome. 2 more quick questions and 3 more quick questions, actually. What are some of the experiences that you had at USD that made you the person you are today? Thank you, Chitty.
Yeah. So, first of all, I was at Pi Alpha Delta, which was, it's like the pre-law fraternity. And, we were like super nerds, but we had the best time. We put together like all kinds of trips, and we just had such a good time. And we would have these deep conversations about things and talk about the world. And, we wanted to kind of save the world via the legal profession. And it's not far off. Honestly, like policy is about law and how it interacts with people and kind of the durability of that bond. And it's so important to care about public policy and how it affects you, especially, this is an election year and it's a presidential election, but the next year it's an off year, right? It's not a presidential election, but there's still a lot of stuff going on. Like you still should know and care about local measures, about people running for school board, about people running for city council, about all of those different things that happen, because people always ask me like, how is it that like Nancy Pelosi or like a Mitch McConnell has been an elected official forever? And I'm like, because people in San Francisco or in Kentucky have been voting for them for like 40 years. From the time Mitch McConnell was working in local politics to now where he's a US senator, people have been voting for him for like 40 years. So voting is really cumulative. It carries through every single election. It carries year after year. And you can't just be engaged in one year, and you have to stay engaged all the way down the ticket. And that's one of the, we used to talk about that in PAD, and that's one of the things that I've always taken with me. And the other thing that I've always taken with me is I was a senior senator, and my friend Tony, who's still a really good friend of mine, also in PAD, we were the senior senators, and we would plan, this sounds so silly, but we would plan these senior happy hours, and everybody would get together and we'd go to, places down in Mission Beach, and we would all just kind of like drink and talk, right? I still think that human interaction is so important. And that's been one of the things that's been really hard for me as kind of an extrovert and as a person who really thrives on that interaction. I still think that's so important. So find ways to continue to reach out to people. And I get everybody's tired of Zoom happy hours and everything else at this point, but we have to figure out through this how to still have human interaction and not become closed off or so isolated in our own little groups or family units, or or just in ourselves. Those are things that I've always taken with me.
Sure. Well, amen to that. I'm an alumni director. My job is to shake hands and kiss babies and get people together, but I'm okay. I'll be fine. Your energy is coming through Zoom, which is not always the case. So I appreciate that. Last question here. Actually, 2 more questions, but this is the last serious question. As women, there's caution to keep emotion out of business interactions, especially when we're trying to highlight I'm reading on behalf of a woman who's trying to highlight injustice or stand up for oneself. So how do you moderate for effect when white hot anger or tearful disappointment are at the fore? I kind of butchered that question, but I think you get the gist of it.
How do you like work when you're like really invested? So I've never worked for a company that I don't feel strongly about what they're doing. that I can't wholeheartedly advocate. There are some people who really can. I mean, I'm probably never going to work for a cigarette company because it's just not my deal, right?
Right.
So first of all, I think you should work on things you're passionate about. If you can work on stuff you're not, I don't have any problem with that. That's how you operate. Um, I think you should bring passion to what you do. And I mean, if there's anything that we've seen over this past few days is that men can't control their emotions. I mean, like, I don't know why that's like a thing that like women are so, you know, emotional that, you know, we can't do serious things. Like women always do serious things. I'm ready for only women to do serious things at this point. I mean, oh my God. But yeah, you do have to remember that there is an end goal. That's super important. And a lot of times, big emotions can overshadow that seriousness. But it's about knowing that you have an end game and being pragmatic to get there. I am very much a planner. I don't like to go into conversations where I don't know what questions are going to be asked. I try to go in like fully prepared. And when you're fully prepared, it's harder to trip you up or to get you caught up in your emotions because you're prepared. Especially if you know that this is going to be an emotional conversation, especially if you know that this is an issue that is like, you know, like you feel like it's do or die. It's something that is, you know, super important. I mean, women have been advocating for issues of great importance for years, and women have found ways to put themselves in those rooms. And, you know, we didn't have good rules on domestic violence until we had women who were prosecutors and defense attorneys, and then realized I have to be a policymaker because I got to change some of this stuff. And they left the legal profession and they ran for office, and they're super passionate about things, and they changed laws. I mean, like, if you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, literally she looked at the civil code and realized this is all BS. Like all these laws, like women can't do like literally like 6,000 different job codes. And she very systematically went after it and changed it. I mean, much of the things that women can do are because she decided that she was going to go to the ACLU and just do it. So I wouldn't worry about it. Use that emotion, channel it into being prepared, channel it into deciding that you are going to change how things work. You're going to change the system, because more than anything at this point, we need people who are incredibly creative. We need people who are very, very passionate and just decide, like, I'm tired of looking at the system. I'm going to be creative about changing it, because just because things have always been a certain way certainly doesn't mean they should stay that way.
Right. I don't think you're a fan of the status quo, you're telling me.
Not at all.
Yeah. Here's a really important question. What is your favorite place on the USD campus?
Oh, so I really love that like long pool behind the Joan Kroc building. That like, I don't even know. The reflecting pool, or
yeah, something like that. Sure.
I used to study there. I love it.
It's a great site. I'll be sure and send you a Zoom background. I forgot to use my Zoom background, but we have a Zoom background of that. So I'll send it to you. And actually all our participants today will get that in the thank you note.
That's amazing.
So I would love to talk for 5 more hours, but I think we told you this would take 30 minutes. So that's going to wrap it up for this Alumni Spotlight. To learn more about the We Said Enough Foundation, visit wesaidenough.com. And I don't think you'll mind me suggesting people, if they really want to know what's what, they should follow Adama Nation on Twitter, right?
Yes, you will get the raw and unfiltered thoughts of
I love it. And then for the latest news, event information, and a listing of online resources from the Alumni Association, visit alumni.sandiego.edu. So thanks everyone for tuning in. And Adama, thank you so much for your time today, but especially for your good work. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. Everybody take care.